Commander Tom Park stood at the observation deck of the Earth diplomatic vessel, taking in the magnificent view of the Arcturian royal palace. The massive structure floated in orbit around the gas giant Arcturus Prime, its crystalline towers catching the light of the distant sun and sending rainbow reflections dancing across the void of space. "Quite impressive, isn't it?" remarked Captain Howan from beside him. "Definitely designed to intimidate visitors," Todman replied, straightening his formal diplomatic uniform. Earth's first major interstellar conference was too important to risk any mistakes. "How long until we dock?" 20 minutes, Commander. The welcoming committee is already assembled in the main reception hall." Todman nodded, mentally reviewing the extensive briefing on Arcturian customs. The aliens had contacted Earth only 3 years ago, but had quickly established themselves as the dominant power in this sector of the galaxy. Their technology was centuries ahead of humanity's, and their empire spanned dozens of star systems. When the Arcturians invited Earth to join the Galactic Concord, it was an opportunity too valuable to pass up. As Earth's top diplomat for extraterrestrial affairs, Todman carried the weight of his entire planet's future on his shoulders. The docking sequence completed smoothly. Todman led the small Earth delegation down the gangway and into the grand reception hall, where representatives from 20 different alien civilizations mingled. The Arcturians themselves stood out with their tall, slender frames and skin that shimmered with an iridescent quality that reminded Todman of mother of pearl. A deep, resonant tone echoed through the chamber, and the crowd fell silent. A massive Arcturian dressed in elaborate ceremonial armor stepped forward. "Delegates of the stars, I present His Imperial Majesty, Emperor Q, Sovereign of the 7 systems, and his daughter, Crown Princess Neri." The Emperor entered, his gait slow and deliberate. The princess followed, her movements graceful and precise. Even by Arcturian standards, she was striking. Her iridescent skin held a bluish tint that caught the light as she moved, and the royal regalia she wore emphasized her regal bearing. The formal introductions began, with each delegation presenting itself to the royal family. When Earth's turn came, Todman stepped forward and performed the ceremonial greeting exactly as instructed. Right hand over heart, slight bow, formal words of respect. Emperor Q acknowledged him with the barest nod, but Princess Neri's eyes lingered on him with what seemed like curiosity. The opening ceremony dragged on for hours. Speeches from the Emperor, from senior delegates, from representatives of each major faction. Todman maintained his diplomatic composure, though his legs ached from standing at attention for so long. Finally, Princess Neri approached the podium to deliver the traditional welcoming address to the new delegates. She spoke with clarity and confidence, her voice melodious even through the translation devices. Then she reached the section addressing the Earth delegation specifically. "To our newest friends from the Blue World, we extend special greetings. We look forward to sharing cultural and technological exchanges that will benefit both our peoples. As you would say in your language, we welcome you as..." She paused, clearly trying to recall the exact human phrase she had practiced. What came out was definitely not what she intended. The translation came through as, "We welcome you as our decorative vegetables." Todman froze. He knew immediately it was a simple translation error. The princess had likely confused the words for valued allies with a similar-sounding phrase. But the mental image of humans as decorative vegetables was too absurd. A small chuckle escaped his lips before he could stop it. The sound seemed to echo in the sudden, complete silence that fell over the great hall. Every alien eye turned toward him, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Emperor Q rose slowly from his throne. His skin, normally a pearlescent white, darkened to a stormy gray. The other Arcturians in the room took a step back. "Human diplomat," the Emperor's voice boomed through the chamber. "You will present yourself in the royal chambers immediately." Captain Howan's face had gone pale. "Commander, what happened? What did you do?" "It was just a small laugh," Todman whispered, suddenly aware he had committed some grave error. An Arcturian official appeared at his side. "This way, Commander Park, the Emperor awaits. The walk to the royal chambers felt like a march to execution. Tai Min racked his brain, trying to remember if there was anything in the cultural briefing about laughing. Nothing came to mind. The royal chamber was smaller than he expected, though no less grand. Emperor Q stood by a viewport, his back to the door. Princess Neri stood to one side, her expression unreadable. "Do you understand what you have done, human?" the Emperor asked without turning. "Your Majesty, if I have caused offense, I sincerely apologize." It was a momentary reaction to a simple translation error. The Emperor turned, his eyes like polished obsidian. In our culture, laughter directed at royalty carries profound significance. It can only mean one of two things: either the gravest insult possible, or, he paused, a claim of intimate connection. Tai Min blinked, trying to process this information. "I assure you, Your Majesty, I intended neither. It was simply, intentions are irrelevant." The act was witnessed by representatives of 20 worlds. The Emperor's voice hardened. "There are only two paths forward. You must either marry my daughter or face the consequences." Tai Min stood speechless, certain he had misheard. "Marry your daughter? But that's—" "Father," Princess Neri interjected, her voice calm but firm. Perhaps the human should understand the full implications of both choices. The Emperor nodded. "Indeed, the alternative to marriage is something our people rarely speak of to outsiders." His eyes fixed on Tai Min with cold intensity. "You have until the moon completes one orbit to decide. Will you wed the princess, or will you choose the alternative?" Tai Min looked from the Emperor to the princess, whose face remained composed though her eyes held what might have been concern. "What exactly is this alternative?" he managed to ask. The Emperor's skin darkened further. "That, Commander Park, is something you should hope never to discover." Tai Min paced the guest quarters he'd been assigned, his mind racing. The room was luxurious by any standard. Crystal walls that changed opacity at a touch, furniture that adjusted to perfectly fit his human physiology, automated systems that anticipated his needs before he voiced them. But none of these comforts eased his anxiety. "Marry an alien princess or face unknown consequences," he muttered to himself. This wasn't in the diplomatic handbook. A chime at the door interrupted his thoughts. His assistant Jeho entered, looking grave. "Tell me you found a way out of this," Tai Min said. Jeho shook his head. "I've been reviewing our briefing materials and consulting with the diplomatic corps back home. It's worse than we thought." He activated a holographic display showing dense text. "By accepting the invitation to this conference, Earth technically agreed to abide by all Arcturian royal protocols." It's in the fine print of the treaty documents. And nobody thought to read that part. Tai Min's voice rose in frustration. "It was all written in highly technical Arcturian legal language. Our translators are still working through most of it." Jeho pointed to a specific section. "But this part is clear. Any offense against royal dignity must be addressed according to traditional Arcturian law." Tai Min collapsed into a chair. "What about this alternative the Emperor mentioned? What exactly am I facing if I refuse to marry his daughter?" Jeho hesitated. "We're not sure. The Arcturians are very secretive about certain aspects of their culture. But based on some historical records we've accessed, it might be some form of ritual combat." "Combat? You mean I'd have to fight someone? Most likely the royal champion." "And Commander," Jeho paused, "no off-worlder has ever survived such a challenge." Tai Min closed his eyes, feeling the weight of his situation. "And what about Earth? How does this affect our position?" "Depends on how you handle it. If you offend them further, we could lose our place in the galactic concord before we've even formally joined. At worst, we could face trade sanctions or even military threats." Another chime at the door interrupted them. An Arcturian royal attendant stood in the doorway, his posture formal. "Commander Park, Her Highness Princess Neri requests your presence in the palace gardens." Tai Min exchanged a look with Jeho before nodding. I'll be right there. The palace gardens were nothing like Timon expected. Rather than plants, the vast space contained crystalline formations that seemed to grow like living things, changing colors and shapes subtly as he passed. At the center, Princess Neri stood beside a fountain that flowed with a liquid too silvery to be water. She turned as he approached, and Taemin was struck again by her otherworldly beauty. In the garden light, her skin shimmered with blues and purples that shifted with her movements. "Commander Park," she greeted him, her voice musical even when speaking his language. "I appreciate you coming." Did I have a choice? The words came out more bitterly than he intended. The princess tilted her head slightly. There are always choices. Some just carry heavier consequences than others. Tai Min took a deep breath. "Princess Nari, I need to understand what's happening. Where I come from, people don't get married because of a laugh. And where I come from, royalty is never the subject of public amusement." Her voice held no anger, only statement of fact. "Our ways may seem strange to you, but they have preserved our society for 50,000 years. So I'm trapped by traditions I don't understand and didn't agree to." The princess gestured for him to walk with her along a path of glowing stones. "In the eyes of my people, you made a clear statement. Either you deliberately insulted the royal family, an act punishable by the ritual of Koltar, or you claimed a personal connection so strong that only marriage could satisfy honor. And what do you think?" Tai Min asked, watching her carefully. For the first time, the princess's composure wavered slightly. "I think you are a visitor who made an understandable mistake, but my opinion cannot override our laws." They walked in silence for a moment before she continued. "I should tell you that the marriage, if you choose it, would be largely ceremonial. We would be joined legally, but," she paused, searching for the right words, "physical compatibility between our species remains untested." Tai Min felt his cheeks flush. "That's not my primary concern right now." "Of course not." Was that amusement in her voice? "My father values appearances above all else. A formal union would satisfy tradition while allowing both our peoples to maintain dignity. And the alternative? This ritual of Koltar." The princess stopped walking, her expression solemn. "It is not spoken of to outsiders. I can tell you only that few Arcturians and no aliens have survived it." Tai Min ran a hand through his hair. "So my choices are marriage to someone I just met or certain death. How is that fair?" "Fairness is a concept that varies between cultures, Commander." She turned to face him directly. "But I can offer a compromise." "I'm listening." "A probationary engagement period. 1 full planetary cycle, approximately 30 of your Earth days. This would satisfy tradition while giving us time to find another solution." Ta Min considered her offer. "And what would this probationary engagement involve?" "We would appear at official functions together. You would learn our ways, and I would learn yours. We would attempt to establish if any form of compatibility exists between us. And if we determine it doesn't." Something flickered across her face, perhaps disappointment. "Then at least we tried in good faith. My father might be persuaded to accept an honorable dissolution." Ta Min thought of Earth's vulnerable position, of the consequences of refusing outright. "I need to consult with my superiors." "Of course." The princess gestured, and an attendant appeared with a small crystal device. "This will allow direct communication with your ship." As Ta Min reached for it, their fingers briefly touched. A small spark jumped between them, and the princess quickly withdrew her hand. "What was that?" Ta Min asked, startled. "An unexpected reaction," she replied, looking as surprised as he felt. "Perhaps our biology is not as incompatible as previously thought." For the first time since this ordeal began, Tai Min found himself truly curious about the princess and her people. There was clearly much more to Arcturian culture than he had been briefed on. "I accept your compromise, Princess Neri. A probationary engagement." She smiled then, a genuine expression that transformed her face. "You may call me Nari when we are alone, Ta Min. After all, we are temporarily engaged. The news of the probationary engagement spread quickly throughout the Arcturian palace. Tai Min found himself the center of attention whenever he entered a room. Some aliens looked at him with curiosity, others with obvious disapproval. The Arcturian nobles were the hardest to read, their iridescent faces revealing little of their thoughts. "They're talking about you in 20 different languages," Jai-Ho informed him during their morning briefing. "Earth's central command is in chaos. Half the admirals think you've secured us a powerful alliance. The other half think you've compromised our independence." Tai Min sighed. "And what do you think?" "I think you didn't have much choice," Jai-Ho replied pragmatically. "But we need to use this month wisely. Learn everything we can about these people." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of an ornate hovering platform escorted by royal guards. The chief attendant bowed slightly. "Commander Park, Her Highness awaits your presence for the day of cultural exchange." Tai Min stepped onto the platform, which adjusted its height to accommodate him perfectly. It glided through the crystalline corridors of the palace, passing chambers filled with alien delegations and strange artifacts. They arrived at a previously unseen section of the palace. The doors slid open to reveal Princess Neri standing before a wall of shifting holographic images. She wore simpler attire today, though the fabric still shimmered with embedded technology beyond Earth's capabilities. "Ta Min," she greeted him with a small nod. "I thought we might begin by exchanging information about our worlds. It seems prudent to know more about each other, given our circumstances." "Agreed," he said, stepping off the platform. "Though I'm not sure where to start." Nari gestured to the wall of images. "These are scenes from my homeworld, Arcturia. Not the palace you see here, but the actual planet where my species evolved." The images showed vast crystal forests, oceans of silver liquid, and cities built into mountain faces. It was beautiful, but utterly alien. "It's remarkable," Tai Min said honestly. "And your Earth?" she asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. Tai Min removed a small device from his pocket. "May I?" When she nodded, he activated it, projecting images of Earth's diverse landscapes: snow-capped mountains, dense jungles, sprawling cities, and vast oceans. Nari moved closer to the images, her eyes wide. So much water, and such variety of environments on a single world. "We have many different climates and ecosystems," Tai Min explained, "and thousands of different cultures." "Thousands?" she asked, sounding surprised. "How do you maintain order with such diversity?" "We don't always," he admitted. "Earth has had many conflicts throughout its history. We're still learning to live together peacefully." Nari's skin rippled with colors that suggested thoughtfulness. "Fascinating. Arcturian society achieved unity 10,000 years ago. We have a saying, many facets, one crystal. On Earth, we say unity in diversity," Tai Min replied. "Similar concept, different metaphor." For the first time, Neri smiled at him directly. The effect was startling. Her entire face seemed to light up from within. Perhaps our worlds are not so different after all. The day continued with them exchanging information about their respective planets, histories, and customs. Tai Min found himself genuinely enjoying their conversation. Nari was intelligent and insightful, asking penetrating questions about Earth's governance systems and cultural practices. In turn, he learned that Arcturian society was far more complex than the rigid hierarchy it first appeared. Their social structure was based on intricate webs of obligation and honor, with the royal family serving as the central node that connected all others. "And what about you?" Ta Min asked, as they shared a meal of synthesized proteins designed to be compatible with both their biologies. "What's your role beyond being the princess?" Nari hesitated before answering. "I am somewhat unconventional by Arcturian standards. I've spent years studying other species and civilizations, believing we have much to learn from others." "That doesn't sound very popular with the traditionalists." "It isn't," she admitted, My father tolerates my interests because I am his only heir, but there are many in the court who think I'll weaken the empire with my foreign notions. Ta Min noticed how her colors darkened slightly when she spoke of this opposition. Is that why Royal Advisor Sung looks at me like I'm something unpleasant he found on his shoe? Nari made a sound that might have been a laugh. You noticed. Sung leads the traditionalist faction. He believes Arcteria should dominate other species, not collaborate with them. And what do you believe? Ta Min asked quietly. Before she could answer, an alert chimed. Nari touched a console, and a holographic message appeared. The Galactic Trade Commission has requested our presence, she said, rising gracefully. We must continue this conversation later. The Trade Commission meeting proved unexpectedly tense. Representatives from 12 worlds debated shipping routes and resource allocations, with Earth's new trade status a contentious topic. Tai Min felt out of his depth until Nari subtly guided him through the complex negotiations. The Dracon sector cannot sustain additional traffic, argued a reptilian delegate. Earth's vessels would overwhelm our monitoring stations. Before Tai Min could respond, Nari interjected. The Arctarian Empire will provide upgraded sensor arrays to all Dracon monitoring stations. This should resolve the capacity issue. The reptilian seemed taken aback by her offer. That is, most generous, Your Highness. Later, as they left the chamber, Tai Min turned to her. Why did you do that? Those sensor arrays must be valuable. They are, she confirmed. But this engagement gives me certain liberties. My father rarely questions my diplomatic decisions now, fearing it might offend you and Earth. So you're using our situation to advance your agenda, Tai Min realized. Nari's colors shifted to a defensive pattern. Is that so different from what you're doing? Learning our weaknesses, our technology, our political structure. Their eyes met in a moment of honest recognition. They were both using this forced arrangement to their advantage. I suppose not, Tai Min admitted. We're both serving our people's interests. Yes, she said, her colors softening. Though I find myself increasingly interested in your welfare as well. The admission surprised them both. After an awkward moment, they continued walking. The annual Stellar Exhibition is tomorrow, Nari said, changing the subject. It's an important cultural event. Many nobles will be watching to see how we interact. What should I know to avoid causing another incident? Just stay close to me, she said. And perhaps try not to laugh. For the first time since this ordeal began, they both smiled at the shared joke. As they parted ways at her chambers, Tai Min found himself looking forward to seeing her again. The thought was as surprising as it was undeniable. 3 weeks into the probationary engagement, Tai Min found himself standing beside Princess Nari in the grand ballroom of the Arctarian Palace. The annual Stellar Exhibition was the most important social event of the year, with representatives from every world in the Galactic Concord in attendance. You look troubled, Nari whispered, her skin rippling with subtle patterns that Tai Min had learned indicated concern. Just feeling out of place, he replied honestly. I'm still learning to navigate all these complex social rules. You're doing better than you think, she assured him. The Jovian ambassador was quite impressed with your knowledge of their customs. Tai Min smiled slightly. I had a good teacher. Over the past weeks, their relationship had evolved from awkward formality to something approaching friendship. Each day, they spent hours together learning about each other's cultures, attending diplomatic functions, and navigating the treacherous waters of interstellar politics. Tai Min had discovered that beneath her royal exterior, Nari was passionate about reforming Arctarian society. She envisioned an empire that collaborated with other species rather than dominating them. For her part, Nari seemed genuinely fascinated by Earth's diverse cultures and democratic ideals. Emperor Q approached them, his royal guards creating a respectful space around him. Daughter, Commander Park, the exhibition is about to begin. They followed him to the royal viewing platform, which offered the best view of the central display area. Tai Min noticed Royal Advisor Sun watching them from across the room, his skin dark with what Ta Min had learned to recognize as disapproval. The traditionalists grow more vocal in their opposition, Nari murmured, following his gaze. They fear our engagement signals a new era of foreign influence. Are they right to worry? Ta Min asked quietly. Nari's colors shifted to a pattern he hadn't seen before. Perhaps. Change is inevitable, even for a civilization as old as ours. The lights dimmed, and the exhibition began. Holographic displays filled the central chamber, showing the wonders of different worlds across the galaxy. Earth's display, a compilation of natural wonders and human achievements, drew appreciative murmurs from the crowd. When the Arcturian exhibition began, Ta Min was mesmerized. Three-dimensional crystal formations grew and transformed in the center of the room, creating shapes of impossible beauty, while emitting harmonics that resonated with something deep within his chest. "It's incredible," he whispered to Nari. "This art form takes decades to master," she explained. The crystals respond to the artist's bioelectric field, shaped by thoughts and emotions. As the display reached its climax, the main lights suddenly went out completely. The room plunged into darkness. "Power failure?" Ta Min asked, instantly alert. "Impossible," Nari replied, her voice tense. "The palace has multiple redundant systems." Ta Min's military training kicked in. He sensed more than saw movement in the darkness, someone approaching the royal platform rapidly. "Get down," he shouted, tackling Nari to the floor just as a beam of energy sizzled through the space where she had been standing. The bolt struck the wall behind them, leaving a smoking crater in the crystal surface. Chaos erupted in the darkness. Guests shouted in alarm, security forces activated emergency protocols, and more energy beams cut through the room. Ta Min kept his body protectively over Nari. "Are you hurt?" he asked urgently. "No," she replied, her voice steady despite the danger. "But we need to move. The royal chambers have secure rooms. Lead the way. I'll cover you." As emergency lighting flickered on, they could see masked figures moving through the crowd, clearly targeting the royal platform. Palace guards engaged the attackers, but they were outnumbered. "This way," Nari said, pulling Ta Min toward a concealed exit behind the throne. They moved swiftly through hidden corridors, Nari leading with confidence born of a lifetime, navigating the palace. Behind them, they could hear shouts and the distinctive sound of energy weapons. "Who are they?" Ta Min asked as they hurried along. "Traditionalists, most likely," Nari replied grimly. "They've been threatening action against foreign influences for months." They reached a junction where three corridors met. Nari hesitated, then pointed left. "The secure chamber is." She never finished her sentence. A masked figure stepped out from the right corridor, weapon raised. Ta Min didn't think. He pushed Nari behind him and lunged at the attacker. Years of combat training paid off. He knocked the weapon aside as it discharged, sending an energy bolt into the ceiling. With precise movements, Ta Min disarmed the attacker and pinned them against the wall. "Who sent you?" he demanded, removing the mask to reveal a young Arcturian male. "The true defenders of Arcteria," the youth spat. "Those who would keep our blood pure." More security forces arrived, taking the attacker into custody. Ta Min turned to check on Nari, finding her watching him with an expression he couldn't read. "Are you all right?" he asked. "You saved my life," she stated simply. "You placed yourself between me and certain death without hesitation." Before he could respond, Emperor Q arrived with his personal guard. His skin was dark with rage and concern. "Daughter, are you harmed?" "I am uninjured, father, thanks to Commander Park's quick action." The Emperor turned to Ta Min, his expression softening. "You have my gratitude, human. Few would risk themselves for another species." "I didn't think about species," Ta Min replied honestly. "I just reacted." Hours later, after security had been restored and the conspirators identified, Ta Min and Nari sat alone in a small royal chamber. The attack had been planned by a faction of young traditionalists led by Sung's nephew, intending to eliminate Nari and blame Earth delegates for the assassination. 16 attackers, Nari said, reviewing the security report, all from noble houses aligned with the traditionalist faction. Will they be punished? Ta Min asked. Severely, she confirmed. But the real question is whether this was an isolated incident or the beginning of something larger. Ta Min noticed she seemed troubled beyond the obvious concerns about the attack. What is it? What aren't you telling me? Nari hesitated, then spoke softly. The probationary period ends in 1 week. You will have to make your choice. Between marriage and this mysterious alternative, right? Ta Min said, trying to lighten the mood. You still haven't told me what it is. Nari's colors darkened to a deep blue. Sadness, he had learned. It is called the Ritual of Koltar, a ceremonial combat against our greatest warrior. In 50,000 years, only 3 challengers have survived. The gravity of his situation hit Ta Min anew. I see. There's something else, Nari said, meeting his eyes directly. This arrangement began as a political necessity for both of us, but I find myself unexpectedly affected by your presence in my life. Ta Min felt his heart beat faster. What are you saying? I'm saying that the thought of you choosing Koltar distresses me greatly, she admitted, and not just for diplomatic reasons. Their eyes held for a long moment, mutual understanding passing between them. What had begun as a cultural misunderstanding had become something neither of them had anticipated. We still have a week, Ta Min said softly. Let's figure this out together. The final day of the probationary engagement arrived with a sense of gravity that permeated the entire palace. Arcturian nobles gathered in the great hall, their skin shifting with colors that reflected anticipation and curiosity. Representatives from every world in the galactic concord took their assigned places, eager to witness the resolution of what had become the most talked-about diplomatic incident in recent memory. Ta Min stood alone in his quarters, adjusting his formal Earth uniform one last time. The past week had been a whirlwind of private discussions with Nari, encrypted communications with Earth's leadership, and careful planning. Jaiho entered, his expression serious. It's time, Commander. The Emperor awaits. How do I look? Ta Min asked, attempting humor despite his nerves. Like a man walking into the unknown, Jaiho replied honestly. Are you sure about this plan? Ta Min nodded. As sure as I can be. Either way, history gets made today. The walk to the throne room felt both too short and endlessly long. Guards lined the crystal corridors, standing at rigid attention as he passed. When the massive doors swung open, a hush fell over the assembled crowd. Emperor Q sat on his crystalline throne, his expression unreadable. Princess Neri stood to his right, her skin a controlled pattern of formal blues and purples that revealed nothing of her thoughts. Royal advisor Sung and other court officials flanked the throne, watching Ta Min's approach with varying degrees of interest and hostility. Ta Min walked to the center of the hall and bowed precisely as Arcturian custom dictated, not too deep, which would signal submission, but not too shallow, which would indicate disrespect. Commander Ta Min Park of Earth, the Emperor's voice echoed through the chamber. The time has come for your decision. Will you honor your claim on my daughter through marriage, or will you face the ritual of Koltar? A tense silence fell over the hall. Ta Min took a deep breath and spoke clearly so all could hear. Your Imperial Majesty, I cannot marry Princess Neri under these circumstances. Murmurs erupted throughout the hall. The Emperor's skin darkened slightly, and Sung's face showed the first hints of satisfaction. Then you choose Koltar, the Emperor stated gravely. No, Your Majesty, Ta Min replied firmly. I choose a third path. The murmurs grew louder. The Emperor leaned forward, his interest piqued despite himself. Explain yourself, human. There is no third path in our tradition. With respect, Emperor Q, traditions evolve or they die. The Arcturian Empire has thrived for 50,000 years, because it adapted when necessary. Ta-Min paused, making eye contact with Neri, who gave him an almost imperceptible nod of encouragement. I propose a formal alliance between Earth and Arcteria through the establishment of a permanent cultural exchange program. I would serve as Earth's ambassador, working directly with Princess Neri to build understanding between our peoples. You reject my daughter? The Emperor asked, his voice dangerously quiet. I reject coercion, Ta-Min clarified. Marriage should be built on mutual choice, not diplomatic necessity. I have come to greatly respect Princess Neri and your culture. Given time and freedom, who knows what might develop naturally. But forcing a union now serves neither of our peoples. The Emperor's skin shifted through several color patterns as he considered this response. The court waited in tense silence. And what of honor? Sung interjected before the Emperor could speak. Our laws demand satisfaction for the offense. The offense was a cultural misunderstanding, Ta-Min countered. In my culture, laughter can be a sign of appreciation, not mockery. Just as your customs were foreign to me, mine were to you. Should we punish honest mistakes with death or forced marriage? He turned to address the assembled delegates directly. Every species represented here has experienced similar misunderstandings when meeting new civilizations. How we resolve them defines who we are. Princess Neri stepped forward. Father, if I may speak. The Emperor nodded, and all eyes turned to the princess. Commander Park saved my life during the traditionalist attack. He placed himself between me and certain death without hesitation. Such actions reveal more about a person's character than any formal protocol. Her colors shifted to a pattern of conviction that everyone could read. I support his proposal. Emperor Q remained silent for a long moment, the entire hall holding its breath. Finally, he spoke. For 50,000 years, Arcturian law has governed our interactions with other species. Yet Commander Park speaks truth. We have survived because we adapted when necessary. He rose from his throne, towering over Ta-Min. Your courage impresses me, human. Few would dare propose alternatives to our ancient traditions. Fewer still would risk Koltar by refusing the safer path. The Emperor's colors shifted to a complex pattern that Ta-Min couldn't fully interpret. I accept your proposal with one condition. This cultural exchange program must be led by individuals of appropriate rank. You will be named Earth's High Ambassador to Arcteria, and my daughter will serve as Arcturian Ambassador to Earth. Relief washed over Ta-Min. Thank you, Your Majesty. Earth will be honored by this arrangement. The formal ceremony that followed lasted hours, with both Ta-Min and Neri signing crystalline documents that glowed with legal authority. The Galactic Concord representatives witnessed the agreements, making the alliance official across known space. Later, as celebrations continued throughout the palace, Ta-Min found himself alone with Neri on a private balcony overlooking the gas giant below. That was quite a gamble, she said, her colors showing amusement and admiration. Few have challenged my father's will so directly and lived to tell about it. I had good intelligence, Ta-Min replied with a smile. Someone once told me the Emperor values strength and innovation, despite his traditional exterior. Neri's colors shifted to a pattern he had only seen once before, the night she had admitted her feelings. And what of your other reasons? Were they purely diplomatic? Ta-Min moved closer, careful but deliberate. You know they weren't, but I meant what I said about coercion. Some things should develop naturally. Like understanding between different species, she asked, her hand moving subtly closer to his. Like that, he agreed. And perhaps more, given time. Their fingers touched, and the now familiar spark jumped between them. Neither pulled away. We have much work ahead, Neri said softly. Many traditionalists will oppose our alliance. Then we'll face them together, Ta-Min replied. One challenge at a time. Below them, the stars reflected on the gaseous surface of Arcturus Prime, creating patterns that looked remarkably like Earth's oceans on a sunny day. Two worlds, not so different after all. I never thought a simple laugh would lead to this, Timon mused. In our oldest legends, Neri replied, the universe itself began with divine laughter. Perhaps it's fitting that our new beginning did too. For the first time since their meeting, they both laughed freely together, the sound carrying across the crystal palace and into the vast expanse of possibilities that lay before them.